All right, so let's talk about bands. We have a shirt constructed all the way through the neckband, so all that's left are raw sleeves and the raw hem at the bottom. And then I have my 4 band pieces. And we are just going to make and then attach the bands for this top to finish it off. So one of my favorite things about using bands is that I don't need to break out a second machine. I can use my serger for all of the construction. So for the neckband, I did need to break out my regular machine, but I won't then need to break out my cover stitch for this, or switch to a twin needle, or pick a stretch stitch, or anything that I like for hemming. I can do it all in one step right here. So let's start with the armband construction right here. So I have my 2 armband pieces currently folded in half, right sides together. And so the instructions have you sew this just like this. So I'm gonna set that aside for now. So it has you sew this just like this, and then you turn it right sides out and fold it in half with wrong sides together. But my tip and trick for you is if you actually fold this in half one more time, and you can clip it if you want. You can just take it straight to the machine if you want. So you've got this folded in half right sides together, and then just in half one more time, and take that to the machine and sew it just like normal. Okay, so then you just want to trim off your threads, and once you turn this right side out, this becomes magically already a cuff. And so what I really, really like about this is, one, I use less thread, it takes less time. I guess those are great things. Those are great things. That's not why I do this though. So I do this because this seam is now always going to be together and on one side. So you're never going to get that fold one way and then fold the other way of the seam allowance on the inside. This is just already done. And once I've turned it right sides out, it really just already becomes a cuff, which is just so convenient. I just love that. So I am just going to mark the other half of that, and I'm going to sew this one really quick so I can do both of my cuffs at the same time, because I'm a big fan of batch sewing. So I really like prepping as many steps as possible all at once and then taking it to the machine. All right, so let me unfold this one more time to show you what it looks like, because it's pretty magical. That's it. There's my cuff, all done, all ready to be attached to my shirt, which is just so convenient. Okay, so let me again just mark the opposite side of this one. And because I like my seams to press toward the back, my side seam to go toward the back, I'm going to align these so that the seam is actually toward the front so that I can nest my seams. And what that means is when I nest them, this seam is going to be pointed this way, and then the seam that I attach it to will be pointed that way, and that just helps reduce bulk at the seam line. So it makes it easier to go through my machine, whether I'm using my serger or my regular machine. And it just makes it smoother and more, I forgot the word, more uniform. Oh my goodness. It just makes it a little bit more uniform. So I just like to lay these out so that I can see them, so that I can be sure to put it on the right way. So let me set that one up there, move those out of the way just a little bit, and come to my sleeve. So I like to put the cuff inside the sleeve while attaching it, but you can certainly turn this right side out and put the cuff on the outside. And then, so I want this seam to go toward the back, so I'm just gonna finger press it toward the back, and then grab my seam where I want it to go toward the front. I want it to nest, like I said, so I'm just gonna align those right there. Oh, I completely forgot a step, y'all. I really like to make sure that these go on smoothly. They usually just match up perfectly, but just in case they don't, I do like to mark this opposite side. And you can do that with the clips that I was showing earlier, with the scissors, just clipping into that seam allowance, or you can do that with a clip or pin. Okay, one more time. So I'm gonna shove that band right inside and line up those seam allowances. I want the sleeve seam allowance to go toward the back of the sleeve, and I want the cuff seam allowance to go toward the front. And I'm going to throw a pin right there. And then I am just going to match up these 2 other clips. Make sure they look really good and clip that in place. And then I'm just going to kind of, again, wiggle. I really like the wiggle technique when I'm sewing, just because it really helps things fall where they need to be. So I'm going to take this right to the serger and sew this in place. I particularly like having the rest of the sleeve pointed up, so my presser foot is actually inside the sleeve while I'm sewing, because it allows me to make sure that nothing else is getting under my presser foot that I don't want under my presser foot. So I'm going to align it right here, make sure my needle's up, and get started. So also be very careful if you're using a serger to make sure that the clipper pin doesn't flop in front, because if this gets moving really fast, that can break and be very dangerous. Okay, so that sleeve cuff is attached. I'm just gonna pull that right on out. I'll give that a decent press just to make sure that it's looking really good, but that is done. So I'm gonna do the exact same thing for the other side. I will mark the opposite edge, throw this inside, and since I want the seam to go the other way, I'm actually going to flip this one so that the seams are on this side, because this seam needs to come this way. So this seam is pointed that way, this seam is pointed that way. And then I'm just going to shove this inside, nonchalant, not gentle, just get it in there and align that back up. 1 clip. 2 clips. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Do any little adjustments that are needed, and right back to the machine. All right, my sleeve cuffs are done. These look fabulous. I cannot wait to turn this out and see what it looks there. But let's do that hem band first. So for this one, I have 2 hemband pieces. And I have these folded right sides out right now, because the first thing that you're going to do with this is just align those 2 pieces along that edge. And then you want to do the same thing with the other side. So just align that up. And so this is also another area where I like to do that cheater method, because I really hate when my when my seam allowances are all wiggly on the inside of my bands. It just gets oddly bulky in some spots, and I just don't like it. So I am going to do exactly the same thing as once I've got them lined up, just fold them right in half, and I'm just going to sew from the folded edge to the cut edge. And you just want to make sure that when you're doing this, you fold them the same way. So you just want to make sure there's no twists or anything in that band. So I'm just going to throw these clips right here and make sure it's nice and smooth, and then take that to my machine. Okay, so we've got our band put together. All I'm going to do is open this out, and we have a nice circle here ready to go on the bottom of our shirt. So what I'm going to do is mark that center front and center back. So I'm just going to align these at the side seams that I just sewed, and just make sure they're nice and straight, and pull that out and do my little clipping method. Especially with this thicker fabric. So I'm using some Ponte de Roma here. With this thicker fabric, I really prefer to clip with my scissors versus just pinning or clipping in place and then aligning, because I find that this is more likely to wiggle around and move on me while I'm trying to get it in place. And that guarantees that I've got the center of the inside and outside layers lined up. So I don't have to worry about them shifting. So for this, because my seams again are going to go toward the back, I've got the seams at the front of this band. And what I'm going to do is just find and mark the center, front, and back of this shirt. So again, I'm just lining up those side seams, making sure that's nice and beautiful and flat. And then a nice little snip snip. And then same thing for the other side. All right. So then I'm going to lay this flat and flip it open. So this is a little weird to look at, but this is my front bodice and this is my back bodice. So since I want this to be my front bodice, I'm going to slide that right here and line up all three of those markings and put the clip right back on. I'm just going to grab 2 extra clips for my side seams and we will be good to go. So I'm going to match up my side seams, nest my seam allowances so they're nice and flat and as not bulky as possible, and then line up all 3 of those notches again in the back. And finally get that last side seam. So if you have a roly-poly fabric or if you just aren't super comfortable, go ahead and go through and add more clips or pins in between these. Since this Ponte di Roma is pretty easy to work with. It's one of the advantages of Ponte. It's a double knit, so it's pretty stable and pretty easy to work with. It behaves a little bit more like a woven than some other knit fabrics, so it's a little bit easier to work with. I am just going to take this to my machine and go ahead and sew it in place. All right, that's it. This shirt is literally ready to be worn. I will give this a good press because sometimes with knits, even if you're not pulling or anything, you'll get a little bit of wave where you've sewn a seam. So I'll give it a good bit of steam just to make sure that it's as beautiful as possible because this fabric is gorgeous and this pattern is gorgeous and this model is gorgeous. So we just want to make it just as beautiful as possible. But look at that beautiful end result. I am just completely in love with it. I think it looks great. Got a little cat fur right there. This is ready to be worn. So the next time you see it, this will be on the lovely Destiny and you can see how it wears and moves. Okay, so this pattern comes with some great options, but there's never just too many options in a pattern, right? So let's talk about a quick hack we can do to find any sleeve length that you would like. So we are going to make kind of an elbow length sleeve on this one right here. I'm going to show 2 hacks for this pattern. And so for Rowan, who will be modeling this one for me, she would like kind of a 10-inch sleeve. So I am starting with the size that her bust is, which is the 4 on this pattern. You can see I've got all of the layers that I'm grading between for her, but you want to make sure to use your sleeve length from your arm side or bust, whichever one you're grading to. So I'm lining this up on the 4. She wants a 10-inch sleeve. I would like to add a 1-inch hem to that, plus the 3/8 inch seam allowance at the top here. So I am going to line this up at 11 3/8 inches right here. And it's a little bit hard to see, I would bet, but we are just looking for this top of the sleeve cap to be at that 11 3/8 inch marking. And then I'm going to just make sure that I'm nice and straight on the pattern piece. And I have a kitten who's just misbehaving in here. I'm just going to draw a nice straight line all the way across over here. I'm just going to scooch this a little bit and just make sure I've got a nice straight line. Normally I would do this in pencil just in case I make mistakes, but I want you to be able to see this. So I've got it in a bright pink. So then the other thing to think about is that here, when you're turning up your hem in order to hem it, because I'm not putting a band or anything on it, I want to make sure I have room for it to flip up and sit comfortably inside and not be too narrow. So what I want to do is come over to, I'm going to grab a smaller ruler so you guys can see a little bit better. You want to come over here. So I'm working with this innermost line. So what I want to do is come 1 inch above the new hemline that I've just drawn and make a little mark. And then what I actually want is 2 inches above that. I want to line up, let me use the actual 2-inch mark so you can see this. I want to line up the 2-inch mark right here and make a mark right here. And what I want to do is just connect those 2 marks. And I want to do that on both sides, so that what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this and then out and then across. And I'm going to do the same thing over here so you can see that one more time. So I'm lining this up with the 2-inch on my ruler lined up with my hemline, and I'm marking down here right where that same width is up here, because when you flip this inside, that needs to match up with that. And if it's a little bit narrower, that's okay. You're using knit fabrics, they'll stretch, it'll be okay if there's a little wiggle room. But this just really helps make sure that you've got the room you need to hem. And then I'm just marking that 1 inch along the line I'm actually going to cut. So then I'll connect those 2 marks. And what I'll cut out from my pattern and then out of my fabric is down here, out, and then across, and then back in before going up and doing the entire sleeve head. So that will be my sleeve. And then I'm going to construct the rest of this exactly as the pattern without sleeve bands. So I'm going to do those shoulders, throw the sleeve in there, do the side seam just like we did earlier. And then when it comes to hemming, I'm just going to turn this up 1 inch and top stitch it with my cover stitch machine. You can use whatever top stitching you prefer, and we'll have a nice elbow length sleeve. So you can see that in a little bit when you see the lovely Rowan wearing her Sapphire dress. Okay, I did just want to show you really quick what that sleeve looks like before I cut it out of fabric. So you can see that I followed that size 4 cut line for all of the bits up to 1 inch from my hemline. And then I just followed the pink lines that I added for my hack. So I'm just going to cut 2 of these out, mirror just like always, and we are good to go. Alright, so I'm super excited for the second hack that I'm going to show you today, and that is just to turn this beautiful sweater into a dress. So what I've done is I have my long ruler, my nice long ruler, because I like to be able to do this in one if I can, and I've got my back pattern piece. And why I have my back pattern piece is because in order to find out how long my model wants her dress to be, I just measured from center back, from where the neckband will sit, down to the length that she's looking for. So she is 5'6", but she carries all of her height in her torso, and she's looking for kind of an above the knee dress. So we're not adding a ton of length here, we're not changing the pattern too much. So I am just going to line this up along the back edge, and then give myself, she wants 33 inches from center back neck edge down to her hem. So I've got this at 33 3/8, but this pattern includes a 1 inch hem allowance. So I'm going to actually put that at 34 3/8 inches. So over here I have 34 3/8 right at the center back neck edge, and just straight along the back edge here. And I'm just going to make a nice little mark right here. And then also make note that from the bottom line, I am adding exactly 3.5 inches. So what I'll do is, now that I've got that measurement, I will come along this bottom edge and line up my 3.5 inch mark with the hemline here. So for her adjustments, I need to grade in between sizes, but that won't affect the length that I'm adding here. So that's why I'm adding it first. And She is slightly shorter than the pattern is drafted for, but she carries all of her height in her torso, so I don't actually need to make any adjustments to the dress. Other than adjusting it to be a dress. So you can see I'm just coming along and lining up the 3.5 and making a little mark and making a little mark. And what I'm gonna do is carry this side seam. I'm actually gonna pull this a little closer so I can be on this side of it. I'm gonna carry this side seam basically straight down from its widest point. You can definitely use a French curve and curve that a little bit, but with how small we're adding, just that little bit we're adding, I don't need to curve back in. It can go nice and straight from there. And then I'm just gonna connect the dots, or dashes in this case. And this part doesn't have to be super, super straight, but you can go through, like, these are pretty wide apart. You might wanna go back through and add in one more marking over here, just so that you're sure you're connecting them appropriately. You don't have to have the straightest line in the world here, because you're gonna cut this out of paper and then you're gonna cut it out of the pattern and then you're gonna hem it. So if it's not super, super perfect, you can definitely correct for that later. And then I'm just gonna come in here and draw in a continuation of the center back seam. I just wanna make sure that I'm lined up along the edge and just draw that all the way down. And so the reason I did the back first is because I took that center back measurement on her. So I will finish grading this and cut this one out, and then I will do this exact same thing on the front of the now dress. I will add that 3.5 inches to the bottom hemline, and then I'll go ahead and cut it out and construct it just like we constructed the one without bands. So that first one that we made. Super simple, nice change. You can really choose any length you'd like if you're looking to make a maxi dress. Really just make sure that you personalize it to your adjustments or your model's measurements, whichever one you're doing, and you can have a cute dress with that same beautiful neckline and that same fit that you just love out of this sweater. So I'm going to get going on this and then we can see it modeled. All right, and just like the sleeve, I just wanted you to see this back pattern piece before I cut it out of fabric. You can see I graded here for her bust, waist, hips. So she'll have a nice, beautiful fitting dress. We are using DTY for her, which is drawn textured yarn. So it'll be nice and flowy and very cool and beautiful, and I'm very excited to see the end result. So let's do the same adjustments to the front and get going. Okay, and then this is the front of our dress length sapphire hack. So I just wanted you to see the 3.5 inches that I added to the hemline, and then I just graded for her specific measurements, and that's it. So I'm gonna finish constructing this and then we'll see the final product. I'm excited. Okay, so we have all 3 of these completed. We have the very lovely Zawadi in the classic no bands. She is rocking the mid-hip length, which I think is just lovely. This is the double brush poly, so that's how that wears and looks and it, hangs. I just think she looks really lovely. And then next up we have Destiny. She has the high hip version. We also did some petite adjustments for her because she is big in attitude but short in height, which we love. She has both the armbands and the hem band on hers, and it just looks lovely. And this Ponte de Roma, this peacock blue is just gorgeous. And of course we have the lovely hack to do some nice shorter sleeves and a dress length on the wonderful Rowan. She has a DTY, which is a much flowier fabric. It is actually the same fabric base as the Sienna double brush poly that Zawadi is wearing. It's just not brushed. So it's a little bit flowier, a little bit lighter, and just lovely. So these are my beautiful models looking gorgeous in this pattern and having as much fun as possible. So I hope you enjoyed this sew along and enjoy sewing up your own version.